Hello. My name is Jones, and today we are going to look at defilement. The objective of this lesson is to define the term defilement, outline factors that could contribute to defilement cases in a community, explain signs and symptoms that could be observed in a child that has been defiled. Look at the roles that a community health nurse can play in situations to do with defilement. Explain the measures that government could put in place to prevent child defilement. Okay, so by definition, defilement is having sexual intercourse with a person under the age of 18 years, irrespective of sex, that is, boy or girl. It doesn't matter whether the person has given consent or not. The major determinant in defilement is age. Factors that could contribute to defilement cases in the community are many. But in this discussion, we are going to look at factors like indecent dressing and inappropriate behavior, use of sexual boosters or libido enhancers, sexual perversity, lack of adequate institutional daycare centers, psychiatric disorders, beliefs, lack of parental care, inadequacy in housing, watching of pornographic videos, traditional and customary practices, variation of culture to culture, quest for wealth, and customary marriage as some of the contributing factors to defilement cases. So when we say indecent dressing and inappropriate behavior, some examples that we can necessarily pick from is that small girls sometimes patronize clubs and taverns and other alcohol drinking places with implicit dressing. This can be one of the main reasons as to why we find big people, elderly people, being tempted to have carnal knowledge with small girls. Number 2, use of sex boosters or libido enhancers. Traditional medicines and concoctions are being sold by traditional healers to men, especially for those that want to enlarge their main organ used in reproductive activities. And a lot of people you find in leading malls, you find they are selling libido enhancers. So when one enhances their libido and the appropriate partner for age is not available, these people become now tempted to seeking sexual services from youngsters that might be below 18 years of age. Then the other contributing factors to defilement cases is sexual perversity. This is a situation where those that are involved have no control over their sexual desires and therefore take advantage of young children that have been left in their care. The other contributing factor to defilement is lack of adequate institutional daycare centers for children And also, when you look at the fees for some existing institutional daycares, they are very, very prohibitive, or they are very expensive. So you find that a lot of people cannot afford. Hence, it creates a situation where children, especially for those with parents who are working, are left in the care of relatives who most of the time may tend to abuse these children or may defile these children. The other contributing factor to defilement is psychiatry disorders. It is on record that some perpetrators are known to be pedophiles. Okay, so pedophiles, these are people with sexual perversion, okay, in which children are preferred as sexual objects for reasons even they themselves, okay, that are involved in this sexual activity may not comprehend. So psychiatric disorders, some individuals may be pedophile, okay, from pediatrics, okay, for pedophiles, so which is a sexual perversion in which children become the preferred sexual objects for these defilers. Okay, the other contributing factor to defilement is beliefs that having sex with a minor can cure HIV/AIDS. How sorry this situation is. You find that witch doctors wrongfully advise HIV and AIDS patients to sleep with minors in order to be cured of HIV/AIDS. With the prevalence of HIV and AIDS, there are a lot of superstitions and beliefs that sex with the child can cure HIV and AIDS. But it's not only for cure of HIV/AIDS that witch doctors may advise an elderly person to have carnal knowledge with a child. Sometimes it's for boosting of business potential. It can be for increasing chances of promotion at places of work or enhancing other powers. So, witch doctors and traditional leaders or traditional healers may advise their clients to do this. Now, as nurses or health practitioners, traditional leaders and witch doctors are our partners in healthcare service delivery. So they can be educated on the implication of such an advice to their clients, that it would land their clients in prison and they themselves as accomplices to the crime that has been committed. So traditional leaders and traditional healers and witch doctors needs to be educated about how HIV and AIDS can be managed without necessarily defiling children. The other contributing factors to child development, child defilement, is lack of parental care. It is argued that the inability of most parents to provide adequately for their children due to poverty is going to force, especially girls, into sexual relations with taxi drivers, bus drivers, and others, so that they raise some money to afford them, that is to afford them the clothes, food that they need. So parental support is thus lacking in many households today, where it is found that parents spend less time with their families because of work-related issues and other engagements to bring food on the table, making these children vulnerable to these sexual predators. Some parents leave home early, leaving their children asleep, and may come back very late when the children have already gone to bed. So there is literally no time for parents to have with their children and find out some problems or challenges that they are facing. So it is true that lack of parental care and poverty can actually motivate some children to engage into child prostitution in order to make ends meet, and thereby escalate instances of child defilement. The other contributing factor to child defilement is inadequacy in housing. This could also have a volatile situation that is likely to promote strange behavioral patterns among members of particular households. You can see especially those of mainly extended family setups. They live together in a house which does not have enough or adequate space. For example, a family of 8 or so members could be housed in a one-bedroom house. The husband and the wife, who are the owners of the house, could occupy the one bedroom that this house has. The rest of the family will share different corners within this house, and maybe the boys in one corner and the girls in the other corner. This creates a vulnerable state. Sometimes it has taken for granted that a youngster of 3 years or so can sleep with the elderly, believing that nothing would happen to the child, since this child is in the care of the elderly person. Well, this is not the case most of the time, because mostly child deferment involves close relatives, people that are related to the person who has committed the crime of child defilement. Okay, so the other contributing factors to child defilement is watching pornographic videos. Child defilement cases could also be escalated if watching of pornographic videos in the home is allowed. With the coming of the internet, pornography is more accessible and is more common than it used to be in the past. In pornographic materials, there is depictions of scenes of heterosexual activities, rape, oral and anal or group sex, incest, bestiality, and other loathsome outpouring of perversions. We see these in some of cartoon movies. We see these in some of children movies, or movies that children are subjected to watch. So parental guidance, especially for those movies that these children might be watching, is very, very important. Actually, my advice would be that parents should get acquainted with what children are necessarily watching on TV for them to be comfortable that what they are watching is not polluting their mind, because television tends to brainwash children, and the parents should not allow the television to become the parent to the children, or to become the source of learning about morals of the society. As repeated use of pornography can interfere with the ability to enjoy and participate in normal life for these children. Okay, and pornography leads to a decrease in marital intimacy. A specialist in treating sexual addiction once stated that what starts as a casual viewing of pornography can eventually lead to deviant sexual acts. So pornography is not good for children or adults at all. So to avoid increase in child defilement, there should be regulation on the type certain of movies the children necessarily watch, and guidance on the rating for the movies that children are subjected to watch, because most of them depict scenes of sexual content that might not be fit for age. The other contributing factors to defilement is traditional and customary practices like initiation ceremonies. So these may lead to early marriages and perpetuate defilement of especially girl child. The lessons that are given during initiation ceremonies include seductive scenes which the girl has to imitate, and she can later put these lessons into practice by engaging in sexual relationships. The next contributing factor to defilement is variation of culture to culture. In Zambia, because of the popular belief that children are safe, HIV-free, you find that child sexual cleansing, in case where a widow or widower has sex with a child to obtain cleansing and ward off the ghosts of the deceased spouse from causing trouble. So we see this in the variation of culture to culture, as these things necessarily of cleansing necessarily exist within our community. The other contributing factor to child defilement is quest for wealth. There is this belief that sex with children can bring about success in business. Of course, this advice may come from our witch doctors and traditional healers. Hence, we need to be wary of these things and educate our witch doctors on the dangers of giving such an advice. The other contributing factor to child defilement is that girls are defiled and sexually exploited just because they are girls. Okay? You find that if girls are involved in streetism, or they are involved in selling of things within the streets, mostly it's girls that are likely to be abused within these girls, for those that are homeless and even those that have got homes. So when these girls are selling this produce on the street, you find that they are likely to be abused. Girls walk long distances to school, find taxi drivers and bus drivers, give them free transport, and then in exchange they may ask for something, okay, or the house servants may ask for some certain favors, because they are carrying them on their back and easing their movement. Hence, this may end up in child defilement. Okay, lastly, the other factor that I can talk about as contributing to child defilement is customary marriages, where girls are married off at a tender age due to poverty or certain traditional beliefs or lack of education. These are some of the factors that may contribute to defilement. Let us now discuss some signs and symptoms that one can observe in a child that has been defiled. Though children may not speak about abuse, they may nevertheless communicate that something significant and disturbing has happened to them in a non-verbal manner. So some of the signs and symptoms that necessarily you can observe to do with defilement is that there will be significant or sudden changes in the mood or behavior of a child. The other signs and symptoms that you might see is that children may also begin to isolate themselves. In mental health, mostly that we look at it as withdrawal. The other symptoms or signs that we see is that some victims of sexual abuse or assault tend to change in their appearance, looking dirty or looking less attractive. Then other signs to do with defilement can be signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, where the child starts having some insomnia, becomes heightened in sense of vigilance, becomes fearful, highly anxious, and withdrawn from society. Other signs and symptoms may include when children have been sexually assaulted, they may show medical signs, like they may have a sexually transmitted infection or develop a urinary tract infection, or maybe other hard to explain injuries, change in gait, change in the way they walk. Such things can be observed. Though we need an expert's view necessarily to make judgment that whatever has happened is because of defilement. Then the other symptom that can be seen, or sign that can be seen for the child who has been abused, is that some abused child or youth will act out their inner pain by self-harming. They can have intentional cutting on themselves. This is an attempt necessarily to shift their mind from the abuse. Okay, so these are some of the signs and symptoms that can be observed in the child that has been defiled. So we have said these significant or sudden changes in mood or behavior that may indicate a problem. So change in mood may include signs of depression, sadness, tearfulness, lethargy, anger, or mood swings. Then children may also begin isolating themselves or withdrawing from family or friends, spending all their time outside the home, experimenting with alcohol or drugs, when this has not the case, or like if this was not necessarily the case in the past, or start acting out at home or at school. Conversely, promiscuity or sexually suggestive behaviors may also be seen as some of the characteristic signs and symptoms of a child who has been abused. Then other signs and symptoms is that some victims of sexual abuse or assault will change their appearance and try to become less attractive, wearing unattractive clothes, avoiding cosmetics, or failing to style their hair. Okay, or they may decide to adopt a more seductive or sexualized manner of dressing. The other symptoms or changes in behavior that may indicate defilement is that there will be significant changes in the sleep pattern and habits of the child. There will be significant or sudden changes in appetite and eating patterns, or significant weight gain or loss. There is heightened sense of vigilance, vulnerability, and fearfulness, and this can be possibly combined with a new sensitivity to startle and a desire to withdraw socially, may indicate post-traumatic stress disorder. Other signs and symptoms that we are seeing in child who has been defiled is that when children have been sexually assaulted or raped, they may show medical signs of their attack, including sexually transmitted infections, urinary tract infections, or they may have some surgical complications, injuries on their bodies, unexplained injuries on their bodies, which might be signs of the abuse or that has been inflicted on them during the act. Then some abused children often may tend to self-harm or may tend to harm themselves by cutting themselves with a blade in efforts to distract their emotional pain. Okay, so when you look at some of these cuts that they may inflict on their bodies, you might actually confuse it with a perception that they want to commit suicide. But in actual fact, that is not the case. We are now having children below 10 years with attempted suicide. You might not know what might have led to them to attempt suicide, but there might be some defilement of some kind or other child abuse acts. Okay, so now let us appreciate the role of a community mental health nurse to do with cases of defilement. So, as a community health nurse, what could we do to address the situation of defilement? So, some of our roles as community health nurses or mental health nurses can be consultative in nature. It can be clinical, therapeutic, assessor or researcher, educator, trainer, manager, advocator. We can also take a preventive role and also that of a law enforcer. Then other roles that we can take in addressing defilement situation is that of maintenance of ethics, physical care, and also emotional support. Okay, so when we say consultative role as one of our roles in addressing issues of mental health, we have to give advice to other professionals within the communities about the type and the levels of nursing care that is required for given client groups who has been defiled or children who have suffered defilement. Then the clinical role that we play is that of provision of direct nursing care to the patients in the community through home visits to the parents who have children that have been defiled. Then the therapeutic role is that of employing psychotherapeutic and behavioral methods for management of defiled clients. Then when we look at the other role that we can play of assessor or researcher, is that the nurses may assess the care that has been given to clients and may also assess the outcome of ongoing care programs in prevention of defilement cases. Then the other role that we play in the situation of defilement is that of educator, through creation of awareness in the community about mental health and mental illness, with special focus on vulnerable groups and how to prevent the vice of defilement in our community. Okay, so as educators, we can also play the role of trainers or facilitator by training other professional community leaders, school teachers, and other caregiver professionals in the community in various prevention programs and awareness in the community on what to do in cases of child defilement. Then the other role as managers in relation to addressing defilement is that we manage resources, planning and coordination of programs to do with prevention of defilement in our communities. And then the advocate's role to do with defilement in our communities is that nurses should speak out of the rights and interests of clients in the community by raising awareness of clients' needs in places of employment, school, and markets. This they may do by sensitizing the public or through non-governmental organization or through policymakers, and other service providers that look at the rights of children or clients who have suffered defilement. Nurses also can play a preventive role to do or to address defilement. This can be done or can be achieved through use of primary, secondary, and tertiary level kind of prevention by identifying and preventing defilement cases in the community. Then, though nurses are not coming here as police officers, they can also play the role of law enforcer. A nurse may be the healthcare professional who must document these activities as they are related to her by the patient, or may take photographs of the injuries. In rape cases, the nurse may be a member of the sexual abuse response team who is charged with correcting and preserving evidence. In many countries, nurses are mandated reporters for domestic violence, child abuse, and other abuse that may happen to senior citizens. Then the other role that we can play to do with child defilement or addressing child defilement in our community is that of maintenance of ethics. Victims of abuse have been violated in physical, sexual, or emotional ways. Hence, when you're looking at nurses here, they are expected to deliver care no matter how difficult or ugly the situation may be. Nurses have an ethical expectation to be advocates for their patients, which includes acting to protect them or support them in situations of abuse. Okay, the nurses have also a physical care role in addressing defilement. Sexually abused victims often require physical nursing care. In the emergency room, this may include cleaning wounds or applying a dressing. If injuries are severe, the patient may need surgery and nursing care during the convalescent period. The nurse might provide medication for pain or help the patient learn to walk with some crutches or other assisting aids. In addition, victims of abuse may need education for self-management if they have injuries that may take some time to heal, such as broken bones. But remember also that the psychological bones have been broken, so hence nurses are going to provide psychotherapy. But here we have a physical role of providing physical care to those physical injuries. Maybe lastly, the other role that we can play in addressing defilement is that of emotional support, since we have talked about psychological bonds that have been broken. So the empathetic nurse can help provide emotional support by listening and allowing patients to express whatever they feel. Nurses offer an opportunity to talk about feelings and may also be able to suggest a referral to a counselor who is experienced in dealing with abused victims. The nurse may also be the first person to recognize symptoms of depression or suicide attempts in an abused victim. So these are some of the roles that a nurse may necessarily play in defilement cases, or these are some of the roles that the nurse can necessarily address to do with defilement. Okay, so now let us look at measures that government could put in place to prevent child defilement. So the measures here that we're going to talk about are a lot. Okay, so you may find ways of grouping them if at all you want a good way of remembering these roles. So the measures that government could put in place in preventing child defilement is establishing stiffer punishment for perpetrators of child defilement, increase funding for sensitization programs in the community, call upon institutions, households, and individuals to uphold standards of behavior towards children, both in their private and professional lives. Having a Department of Child Welfare and Protection that is proactive in dealing with cases of child defilement and other abuses. Expediting all sexual gender-based violence cases, investigating and acting on all child sexual abuse or defilement cases. sensitizing traditional healers and advising their clients to do away with the vice of child defilement. Strengthening on the roles of child protection and persecuting those that commit this crime in order to deter other would-be perpetrators. Provide support for victims of child abuse, and also having a legal framework that protects children. Should protect them, and also enforcing child's rights. Having an active or proactive victim support unit that helps families with the victims of child defilement. The state can also play a role of protecting children from sexual exploitation, like children engaging in prostitution or being involved in pornographic material. In particular, take appropriate national, bilateral, and multilateral measures to prevent these vices. Parents and caregivers should ensure the environment in and around the home is safe for their children, and this can be achieved through government giving special leaves for mothers or parents to attend to some of their children's problems or cases that may arise from there. The other way government can help reduce defilement cases is through mobilization of community members and local leaders in activities that emphasize that no child who's below the age of consent to sexual activities should be subjected to that. So, in areas that these children might patronize, like bars and taverns, government can ensure that they adhere to the laws of not having underage children patronizing these areas. So these are some of the roles that government can necessarily play in reducing child defilement or preventing child defilement. So when we say establishing of stiffer punishment for perpetrators of child defilement, government should continue working to ensure that the message gets to all the people, and that the law should continue to take its course in many issues of defilement. There is need to reinforce current legislative laws to curb such vices across the country by providing tougher punishments on culprits, which could send a strong signal to would-be offenders. Then calling upon institutions and households and individuals to uphold standards of behavior toward children both in their private and professional lives is one of those laws that government can necessarily play. Government has the finances, has the human resource that can help to increase education both on TV, radio, and newspapers about child defilement. Okay, so government should ensure that the police department has an active victim support unit that act on all sexual abuse with agency that it deserves. Okay, so ensure that there are such cases are not trampled upon because of corruption, as members of the community may lose hope and confidence on how the government is handling such situations. Okay, if it's to do with fast healing from certain diseases, okay, then traditional leaders or traditional healers can start advising their clients to do away with the vice of child development. So a lot of parties can be involved in dealing with these cases. So government can sponsor for medical specialty those medical practitioners that want to learn how to support defiled victims of child abuse. And also government can provide support to police officers that want to specialize in cases that have to do with child abuse. This is to deter the criminal injustice that may happen and is related to child defilements. So the government can look at ways in which these people with these specialties can respond to cases suspected of child abuse, as the issues of child defilement are quite multidisciplinary and may need a multidisciplinary approach. So governments can step in to coordinate these efforts in trying to curb defilement. Government can also help in stopping child defilement and minimizing the harm to the child when it comes in to bring in the main objective of stopping it from happening in the first place. This is through quick identification by the personnel that are now specialized in this, or by ensuring that more people within our communities are educated on ways of identifying child abuse and also knowing signs of safety methods. So we're going to have a lot of people with increased perceptual observation for the signs of child abuse and knowing the child protection that is there to prevent the jeopardy that may come because of defilement. Defilement is a criminal offense, so the courts should impose some treatment on offenders in order to prevent repeat of child defilement, and government agencies work with the police, public prosecutor services, and other parties so that they improve the investigation and the prosecution of offenders. Okay, so these are some of the roles that government necessarily may play in trying to reduce defilement. On community members and local leaders here is by continuing to raise awareness at household and community level about the importance of protecting children from sexual abuse. There is need to emphasize that no child below 18 years should be allowed to patronize bars, okay, or else they may end up involving themselves in sexual abuse. Also, they should ensure that all child abuse cases are reported to appropriate authorities, including any instances where videos, photos, or audio recordings of children being abused. Then community child welfare communities must review child safeguarding and protection policies to ensure children are safe, and also ensure that the care center, the daycare centers where parents can leave their children so that they are safe, also can charge fees that necessarily are affordable within that community by advocating for a smooth business for such people that are involved in protection of the child whilst the parent is away. Okay, so there you have it. Today we have been looking at defilements. In this lesson, we defined what defilement is, outlined factors that could contribute to defilement cases in the community, explained signs and symptoms that could be observed in a child that has been defiled, and we also looked at the roles that a community health nurse can play or address in situations to do with the defilement. And we have also explained the measures that government could put to prevent child defilement. Okay, so our definition of defilement is that is having sexual intercourse with a person that is boy or girl under the age of 18 years. Okay, so age is a major determinant in defilement or defining defilement. We outlined factors that could contribute to defilement cases in the community, like indecent dressing, use of sexual boosters or libido enhancers, sexual perversity, lack of adequate institutional daycare, psychiatry disorder like pedophiles, then beliefs, like having sex with minors, curing HIV and AIDS, and also lack of parental care or poor parental care. Then other factors is inadequacy in housing, watching pornographic videos, traditional customary practices, variation in culture, quest for wealth, and the customary marriages. These are the contributing factors that we discussed to defilement cases. Then we went on to look at signs and symptoms, of which we said they could be quite valid in nature because there can be physical and emotional signs and symptoms that can be seen. And then when talk about physical, are those things that you can necessarily observe on the child. Talking about psychological, there are certain psychological symptoms that we can see because of the post-traumatic stress events. Okay, so we discussed those and then we looked at the roles of a community health nurse in addressing the situation of child abuse, which included consultative role, clinical role, therapeutic role, researcher, preventive roles, law enforcer, and maintenance of ethics. Okay, just among those that we discussed. And then we also explained the measures that government could put in place to prevent child defilement. Okay, so under this, we looked at establishing of stiffer punishment, funding of sensitization programs, calling for institution and household individuals to uphold highest standards, stopping defilement and minimizing harm to the child through support of victims, and also strengthening child protection policies and policies or laws that are there, supporting of victims, ensuring that people are specialized in this in order to improve investigation and handling of cases to do with child abuse. Having a proactive victim support and also having a multidisciplinary approach to handling of cases of child abuse. Also, the state ensuring that the perpetrators of child abuse perpetrators of this child abuse are subjected to proper investigation and prosecuted accordingly. Okay, so these are some of the roles that government can necessarily play. So from me, I'm saying thank you and keep studying.